Have you ever thought about someone you haven't spoken to in years? And then, out of nowhere, they call you that same day. Or maybe you were silently asking life for an answer, and suddenly the same message started showing up everywhere. In a book, in a conversation, in a dream, in a song lyric you almost skipped. Most people call that coincidence. But what if it's more than that? What if some of the strangest moments in your life are not random at all, but tiny glimpses of a hidden order you were never taught to see? Because for thousands of years, philosophers, mystics, psychologists, and even physicists have all circled around the same unsettling possibility that beneath the chaos of everyday life, there may be a deeper pattern, and once you begin to notice it, something in the way you see reality may begin to shift. In this video, we're going to explore a mystery that sits right at the edge of philosophy, psychology, and science. We'll look at why Carl Jung believed some coincidences carry meaning, why ancient thinkers believed the universe was not dead matter, but living order, and why modern physics, while not proving Jung right, has forced us to admit that reality is far stranger, more connected, and more mysterious than we once imagined. And by the end of this video, I want to offer you something even more important than an explanation. I want to show you why synchronicity may not be about superstition. It may be about awakening. There are moments in life that don't just feel unusual. They feel precise. They arrive with a kind of timing that unsettles you. Not because they're impossible, but because they seem to land directly on something you've been carrying deep inside. A question, a fear, a longing, a crossroads. And when that happens, something in you pauses. Your rational mind may try to explain it away. It says, "You're reading too much into it. You're just noticing patterns. It's probability. It means nothing." And maybe sometimes that's true. But there are also moments that feel different. Moments that don't just surprise you. They reach you. They touch something so exact, so deeply timed, that it feels as if life itself is responding. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a strange and undeniable intimacy, as if reality has, for one brief second, become personal. And that feeling, that uncanny meeting point between your inner world and outer events, is where our story begins. Carl Jung had a name for moments like these. He called them synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, not just events happening at the same time, not just random accidents we later romanticize, but moments when something inside you, a thought, a dream, an emotional state, an inner transformation, lines up with something outside you in a way that feels charged with meaning. That was Jung's radical insight. He believed there are times when life doesn't connect through simple cause and effect, but through meaning. That idea opens a different way of seeing. Because if meaning can connect events just as powerfully as causality can, then reality may be far richer than a machine made of disconnected parts. And Jung didn't come to this lightly. He saw these experiences again and again in the lives of his patients, especially during periods of crisis, transformation, grief, emotional upheaval, and spiritual change. He noticed that when a person was standing at the threshold of becoming someone new, strange coincidences often appeared, as if the outer world were somehow reflecting an inner shift already underway. And the deeper Jung explored this, the more he began to suspect that synchronicity was not just a quirk of the mind. It was pointing towards something larger, something about the structure of reality itself. But Jung didn't stop at psychology, because once he followed this question far enough, it led him somewhere unexpected. Not into religion, not into mysticism alone, but into a conversation with one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century. And what they found there made the mystery even deeper. Long before Jung, ancient philosophers were already wrestling with a similar truth. To many of them, the universe was not a cold, empty machine. It was alive, ordered, meaningful. The Stoics, for example, believed the cosmos was held together by something they called logos, a rational, organizing principle flowing through everything. To them, reality was not chaos pretending to be order. It was order expressing itself through many forms. Human beings were not separate from that order. We were part of it. The soul and the cosmos belong to the same living whole. And when you hear that, something ancient in you may recognize it. Because maybe synchronicity is not a modern idea after all. Maybe it's a modern word for an ancient intuition. That life is connected. That reality has texture. That meaning is not always something we invent. Sometimes, meaning is something we encounter, something we step into, something we suddenly remember. And if that's true, then the moments we call coincidence may not be interruptions in life. They may be moments when the deeper pattern briefly becomes visible. Now this is where we need to slow down. Because if we're going to talk honestly about synchronicity, we also have to talk about the mind. Human beings are pattern-making creatures. We are built to find connections. That's part of what makes us intelligent. It helps us recognize faces, predict danger, understand language, create stories, and make sense of a complicated world. But that same gift can also mislead us. Sometimes we see patterns that aren't really there. Sometimes we project meaning onto randomness. Psychology even has a word for this tendency, epiphania. And that matters. Because not every repeated number is a cosmic message. Not every coincidence is a sign. Not every strange moment carries hidden destiny. That's important to say, because real depth requires honesty. But here's where things get interesting. Explaining part of the mental process does not automatically erase the depth of the experience. Just because the brain is involved in wonder doesn't mean wonder is fake. Just because your mind is the instrument doesn't mean the music is meaningless. Maybe the brain helps us perceive meaningful patterns. Maybe it also distorts them. Both things can be true, which means the real question is not, is synchronicity real or is it just in the mind? The deeper question is, what if the human mind is one of the places where reality becomes meaningful? What if the mechanism doesn't cancel the mystery? What if it's part of how the mystery is perceived? This is where the story becomes even more fascinating. Because Jung eventually began collaborating with Wolfgang Pauli, one of the founding figures of quantum physics. Think about that for a moment. A psychologist studying dreams, symbols, and the unconscious, and a physicist studying the deepest laws of matter, both becoming obsessed with the same underlying question. Is reality more unified than we think? Their discussions went far beyond therapy and equations. They stepped into a strange philosophical territory where psyche and matter no longer looked completely separate. And that does not mean they proved synchronicity in a scientific sense. They didn't. But they did recognize something profound, that the old picture of reality, the one where everything is separate, mechanical, and emotionally empty, might be incomplete. And that idea is still echoing today. Now let's talk about quantum physics, because this is the part people often rush to and oversimplify. Quantum theory has shown us that reality, at its deepest levels, is far stranger than common sense ever imagined. Particles don't behave the way ordinary objects do. At the quantum level, certainty dissolves into probability, and observation begins to matter in unexpected ways. And one of the most astonishing discoveries of all is entanglement. Two particles can become linked in such a way that measuring one reveals a correlated state in the other, even across enormous distances. That is real. That has been experimentally confirmed, and it changes how we think about separateness. But here's the crucial distinction. Quantum entanglement is not the same thing as Jungian synchronicity. Physics has not proven that the universe is sending personalized signs into your life. It has not scientifically verified every mystical interpretation people want to place on coincidence. And we should be careful not to force that claim, because when we do that, we weaken both science and spirituality. But quantum physics does offer something incredibly important: humility. It reminds us that the universe is not obligated to match our old assumptions. It shows us that reality may be more relational, more subtle, and more interconnected than the mechanical worldview once suggested. So no, physics does not prove synchronicity in the literal sense. But it does leave the door open to a much deeper mystery, that the world may not be as disconnected as it looks. And for many people, that realization alone changes everything. So if synchronicity is not just superstition, and not fully explained away by psychology, and not directly proven by physics, then what is it, really? Maybe the answer is more personal than theoretical. Maybe the point is not whether the universe is sending signs. Maybe the point is what these moments are doing to you. Maybe synchronicity is less about prediction and more about alignment. Maybe those strange, meaningful moments enter your life when something inside you is ready to be seen. When an old identity is breaking down. When a truth you've avoided can no longer stay hidden. When your inner life and outer life briefly mirror one another so clearly that you can't keep sleepwalking through your own existence. That may be why synchronicity often shows up during loss, during reinvention, during heartbreak, during grief, during spiritual awakening, during times when life is asking you to become more honest. Because when your old framework starts to crack, you become more porous, more sensitive, more able to notice the symbolic dimension of experience. And maybe that is the real gift. Not certainty, not control, but attention. A deeper attention. One that notices when life is no longer just happening around you, but also speaking to you through timing, reflection, resonance, and symbol. Not to inflate your ego, not to make you feel chosen, but to wake you up. So here is the deeper possibility. What if synchronicity is not proof that you're special, but evidence that you're connected? What if those moments are not there to make you feel important, but to remind you that you belong to something larger than your isolated mind? Maybe life is not shouting instructions at you. Maybe it never was. Maybe it speaks more quietly than that. Through echoes, through timing, through recurring symbols, through unexpected meetings, through the strange precision of a moment that arrives exactly when your soul is ready for it. And maybe the greatest misunderstanding is this. People think synchronicity is about decoding secret messages from the universe. But maybe it's really about becoming the kind of person who can live in relationship with mystery, without losing discernment, without abandoning reason, without flattening everything sacred into statistics, or turning every coincidence into fantasy. That is a much deeper path, and maybe that's where real awakening begins. Not when you become certain, but when you become available, still enough to notice, wise enough to question, open enough to feel, grounded enough to discern, and humble enough to admit that reality may be far more alive than you were taught. So the next time something strange happens, the next time the same message keeps appearing, the next time a dream, a symbol, a person, or a perfectly timed event unsettles you in that quiet, unmistakable way, don't rush to worship it, but don't rush to dismiss it either. Pause and ask, why this now? What is happening in my life beneath the surface? What part of me is this touching? Does this pull me toward truth? Or just fantasy? Does it make me more honest? More peaceful? More awake? Because maybe the real value of synchronicity is not that it explains the universe. Maybe it's that it interrupts your autopilot. Maybe it breaks the spell of numbness. Maybe it reminds you that life is not merely a sequence of tasks and transactions. Maybe it returns you to wonder. And in a world that constantly numbs the soul, that may be one of the most sacred things of all. So perhaps the ancient secret of synchronicity is not that the universe is constantly sending you coded messages. Perhaps the secret is something quieter and more beautiful. Perhaps reality itself is more connected, more layered, and more meaningful than the surface mind usually perceives. And every once in a while, through a coincidence too precise to ignore, through a symbol that returns at the perfect moment, through a meeting, a dream, a phrase, a turning point, the hidden music underneath life becomes audible. Just for a moment, just long enough for you to hear a few notes, just long enough to remember that you are not moving through a dead universe. You are moving through a mystery. And sometimes, if you are quiet enough, honest enough, and awake enough, the mystery whispers back. If you've ever experienced a coincidence that felt too meaningful to ignore, share it in the comments. I'd really love to hear what happened and whether it changed the way you see your life. And if you enjoy exploring the space where psychology, philosophy, science, and spiritual insight meet, subscribe to the channel, because there are some mysteries too important to dismiss, and too beautiful not to explore.